Lou Orlando and Jack Warner, joined by a very special guest. Frankly, on the show that's celebrating 50 years of one on one, I can't think of a better guest than Malcolm Moran, the man who literally founded one on one back in 1974. Malcolm, thank you so much for taking some time to talk to us.
Lou and Jack, it's great to be with you.
I mean, 50 years, man. That is, I know it's New York's longest running sports call-in show, but 50 years is a really long time. Can you believe it?
Well, it used to be a long time. Like 50 used to be old to me. And then like 60 used to be old. No, but no, it really is hard to grasp the concept, given the way things change in the broadcast industry overall, anywhere, much less the number one market in the country, for something to be able to endure for a half century. And I'm laughing because it just sounds so weird to say it. I mean, it's a source of great pride.
What do you remember most about the first ever airing of the show? And could you tell us about what the first episodes of One on One were like?
The thing I remember the most about week one was hoping beyond hope that we could get to week two. I wish I could sit here and say that we had all these grandiose plans of, well, like, what's the first half century going to be like? I mean, we just wanted to establish ourselves with a chance to form a community. I mean, that was really what it was about. I mean, we didn't even get an air check, which probably helps me avoid an enormous amount of embarrassment. But it wasn't that we didn't think of it. I mean, for one thing, I don't know if we had the capability to create an air check because the facilities in those days were so limited to be able to set up the delay, which any talk show has to have just to protect ourselves from people saying inappropriate things. I don't even know if we had the capability to take an air check, but the bottom line is there is none. And I think that just reflected the fact that, like, we were just trying to establish ourselves and become part of a community for as long as we could, and just give our best effort and let it play out and see what happens.
In a lot of ways, I think one on one predates the boom of like the popularity of sports talk radio, whether it's Francesa and Mad Dog or all the different shows that really became staples, especially in New York. One on one predates them by about a decade or two. So you remember what the inspiration was, or when you kind of went like, hey, this is a really good idea. We'd love to do something like this.
Yes. Well, first of all, it's almost 13 years because WFAN made its debut in July of 87. So almost a 13-year span. But the inspiration was that WNBC, which for years occupied the 66 frequency on AM, basically created talk radio in general in the early to mid 1960s. And Bill Mazer, who wound up going on to prominence with television on Channel 5 and just had a wonderful career and was a great guy. Bill Mazer had the drive time show on WNBC, which was a revolutionary thing at the time because here was a concept of a radio station finding a new way to communicate directly with its listeners. And so Bill Mazer, with the challenge round, which was basically a trivia contest, really created this new genre. And then there were a number of other people that did it well in the city. A young broadcaster named John Sterling had a talk show for a while. A disc jockey named Jack Spector on WMCA had a talk show for a while. Marv Albert had one. And probably, along with Bill Mazer, the show that I would consider the model for what we did was that Marty Glickman, who eventually would become a mentor and friend to generations of WFUV staffers, he had one at 11 o'clock at night on weekdays on WNEW AM 1130. And the thing that he did that really became part of our inspiration was that if there was some difference of opinion, if you're talking about a team or a team's chances or who should be MVP or Heisman Trophy, whatever it was done respectfully the way friends would talk. And as you know, as students of the industry, at some point, sports talk radio veered away from that. And in many cases, it became mean spirited and harsh criticisms that may or may not be based in reporting and fact. And the thing that I feel comfortable bragging about as far as one on one, since I was involved in one season, and there are former math professors at Fordham that would be eager to point out that I was not a math major and they could cite the reasons why. But I believe that's 2% of the product over a period of 50 years. And so the thing that has continued through all this time is a spirit of civility, collegiality, just reasonable differences of opinion, and that has endured, that, I mean, that more than anything else is why I'm proud to be a part of this in some small way.
The way that we sort of operate the show now, we cycle hosts every weekend, which causes like a countless combination of hosts. So it's really fun because you get to see different combinations of personalities weekend in and weekend out. But it also gives you a chance when you see a cast for the week and you're casted with your friends, you're excited for it because that camaraderie is already there and that chemistry is already there. So I think it's been so much fun, as both of us having gotten to host one on one, getting to just share the air with so many different people, which leads me sort of to ask you, do you remember any classmate names to this day that were some of your favorite people to host with?
Oh, well, I mean, probably, I mean, it might affect your dinner plans. If I list all of them, but Ed Randall, Bob Heck, Steve Petrone, Paul Brzezowski, Mary Kopetsky, Barbara Shuren, Cheryl Semberger. I mean, one thing I'm very proud of is that at a time when there were not very many women in the industry, I mean, we had female staffers that achieved at a high level. Judy Lukoski, Vivian Dennis, they were all part of this in one way or another. And it was just fun to work with different people as I'm sure you're experiencing now. The thing that struck me 10 years ago when there was a celebration not far from the campus is that this is my 19th academic year since I've transitioned to teaching, first at Penn State and now at IU Indianapolis. And a big part of my job is finding ways to create opportunities so that students that are ready for that kind of challenge can flourish and grow. And I mean, again, I wish I could tell you I had some kind of brilliant plan that I unhatched. But in the fact that one on one has been creating these opportunities to host a show in the number one market in the country with all the cooperation that FUV has gotten through the years from local programs, college programs, the Baseball Hall of Fame, the NFL with the Super Bowl. I mean, these opportunities are just spectacular. And it's just odd that this weird idea that a college kid had 50 years ago has gotten to the point where it's kind of on a parallel track to what my professional role is all these years later.
Branching off of Jack's question, could you shout out the very first original one-on-one crew?
I think it was me. Well, I mean, I know it was me. I can't. It might. The other host might have been Steve Petrone. I mean, I know he was very involved early on, but and it sounds like, oh, what's your problem? You can't remember who your co-host was? Well, I mean, the whole thing was such a blur because, I mean, there had been, I mean, the original kind of embryonic piece of the idea that this might happen is that in my freshman year, which would have been the spring of '72, the Rams played in the NIT. At the time, that getting into the NIT was like getting into the NCAA tournament now. And that was when all the games were played at the Garden. And so they played in an afternoon weekday game. And in those days, the station did not sign on until late afternoon. It was either 4 or 5 o'clock. And so the challenge was, well, there's going to be this block of time between the end of the post-game show and the normal time that we are on the air. What are we going to do? And so the solution was to have a post-game call-in show and try to promote it during the game and invite people to call in and share their thoughts about the game. Again, this is when sports talk radio was in a very primitive stage compared to what we see now. And so that offered proof that we could do it, but our experience was so limited because it was basically unlike anything that any of us had done. So, I mean, it's like anything else that you're doing for the first time, and just the mechanics of it and trying to gain confidence, and oh, by the way, you're in a very early stage of my professional development. I mean, there's a reason that I made a right turn into print journalism. So, I mean, that's why that whole experience is such a blur.
Was the studio always the Keating basement, and how much has the
No,
studio itself
no, no,
changed
no. Oh,
since?
listen. I mean, you guys have no clue how well you've got it. Like, I'm not going to be the guy saying that I walked 8 miles to school in the snow, but uh, as much as the studio on the third floor of Keating had enormous sentimental value to me, compared to the facility as it exists now. I mean, I'm not going to say it was 2 paper cups and a ball of string, but it was closer to that than what you've got now. I mean, I remember when I had a chance to spend a short amount of time with Vin Scully when I was on a Met trip, and we're sitting in the home team dugout during batting practice, and I was, really nervous. And it's like the kind of introduction where you wipe your hand on your pants so that the sweat doesn't become evident. And I introduced myself and said I had gone to Fordham, and he was very generous in describing some memories. And I said that the one thing that I can claim that unites us, he said, "What's that?" And I said, "The control board that was there when I was there was the same one that was there when you were there." So, I mean, that's my only connection with the great Vin Scully. Our voices were modulated by the same control board.
Beyond the fact that our studios are probably separated by 3 floors, you've been gracious enough to kind of pop into our studios every now and then, say hi to the crews. How have you seen WFUV Sports and the studio and everything that they've done in the 21st century? How have you seen that evolve from your time in the 70s?
Well, for the station overall, it reflects a significant investment. And as much as I joke around about the equipment at the time, I mean, I'm always reminding myself of this because it definitely, even though I didn't go into broadcasting, the ways that my FUV experience helped me professionally in terms of providing a broadcast type of preparation to covering games for the New York Times, where the preparation is at the front end to avoid having to look things up at the back end. And I marvel at the fact that in 1947, long before FM radio became a popular form of communication, I mean, probably at least a decade and a half, that the leadership at Fordham University had a vision to connect with the wider audience via this new form of communication. And the lives that that decision, how many years ago, I mean, I told you I wasn't a math major. I mean, the ways that that decision to make the investment, which I'm sure was not cheap, and all the ways that it has impacted the university overall. I mean, I'm not including myself in this group because I didn't go into broadcasting, but it's safe to say that starting with Vin and the professionalism and the graciousness he showed throughout his entire life, some of the university's greatest ambassadors are products of WFUV in general and WFUV sports in particular. And I mean, that's something that the institution should be very proud of.
Coming in to FUV as a freshman 3 years ago, Alex was my sports manager, and one of the first things I kind of keyed in on that he like drilled into us as trainees was you're stepping into something bigger than yourself. There's this tradition that you have to step into and uphold. We look at it now, we're celebrating the 50th anniversary of One on One. What does it mean that for WFUV, the traditions, they're so important, they're so special that they resonate today?
Well, one of the memories that came flooding back when you referred to the third floor studio in Keating is that the first time that I went there at the very beginning of freshman year during orientation, because FUV played a large role in why I enrolled in Fordham in the first place, WFUV and the Ram, both. And that door, and I remember this vividly, reaching out to grab the handle of that door, and it felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Really, because just here I was, literally on the doorstep of this place that I had been thinking about for what, 2, 3 years at least. I mean, the idea that you could turn on the radio and wait a minute, there are college students broadcasting this game. I mean, it's not Marv Albert and it's not Marty Glickman. Like somebody who's in college can do that. And I mean, I had to get past that. And the last time I was there, I just stopped in. I happened to be in town last fall, and it was after a football game, and there was a group of students that were just starting out, and I told them about the importance of getting past that first sense of doubt. I mean, not letting the noise of that self-doubt creep in, and just try to turn that on its head into motivation, that whatever small roles I have a chance to have here in the near future, I don't care what it is. I mean, I don't care. I mean, here's a term that no longer has relevant significance, like the idea of ripping the wires. Like, I don't know what the digital equivalent of ripping the wires is, but I was going to be the best wire ripper in the Bronx. And so just getting past that initial doubt or nervousness or whatever you want to call it and transforming that into action, which can help build confidence. So, I mean, that was something that I just wanted to share because I knew how they felt. I mean, I knew what that doorknob felt like.
Malcolm Moran, the founder of One on One back in 1974, joining us to celebrate the 50th anniversary of One on One, New York's longest running sports call-in show. Malcolm, thank you so much for the stories and taking the time. This was awesome.
Lou and Jack, thank you for having me, and I hope we can do it again at some point in person. I'm probably betting the under as far as making it to the 100th anniversary, but I'll do my best to get back to the Bronx whenever I can.
You know what? Never say never, because the station keeps ticking, and so does One on One.
Oh, I'll do my best to keep ticking.
So
trust me.
We'll be right back with more One on One.